Hey, welcome FreightWaves fans and friends to a Thursday edition, a very special edition of FreightWaves Now, as we are celebrating this very evening the Freight Futures Exchange with a great big dinner and a kickoff, so please excuse some of the things happening on the set as we do this. But today, Nick Austin shining a light on the weather and also shining a light on the flatbed market and how that pertains to other things. Dean Croak, our Chief Insights Officer, bringing us some down low on that. And also Addison Armstrong, our Executive Director of Futures, is going to be telling us why now with futures and a few other interesting things about them. So let's begin. Tell us what's happening disruptively around. Hello, Nick.
Good day to you.
Good day to you. Thank you. Is everything good around the country?
Well, not the entire country.
Okay.
We have just a couple of trouble spots as far as weather today. So Northern California, around the Mount Shasta region, a few more inches of snow. Nothing major, but it is still going to be kind of snowy in that northern part of California. Okay. That's right up in this region here. There could be some spots of heavy snow. So
not quite the Sierras.
Not quite the Sierras, and so, but another snowy area is going to be up across what we call Big Sky Country. That's Montana. Luckily, it's not really going to affect a lot of areas along I-90 or I-15, you know, the major routes, but some secondary routes, especially in the higher elevations of the Crazy Mountains. Yes, that's the name of a mountain range in Montana.
Crazy.
That's right. As well as and also the Beartooth Mountains, which is another range there. So some of those higher elevations could see maybe up to a foot or more of snow, and some wind too. Now, one other trouble spot, it's not snow, but there are some areas of heavy rain. There might be some thunderstorms in parts of the Midwest that have been flooded since that big storm hit there back on the 15th. So that's not good news for them.
No rest for the weary.
Right across northern Missouri, southern parts of Iowa, not a direct hit on Omaha.
Okay. And we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here, aren't we?
That's okay.
So is that pretty much the light that we're shining today on weather?
It is. I want to mention one more thing about the Midwest, though. Even though they're getting some rain today, and there's still going to be ongoing flooding because a lot of gauges along the Missouri River and some of their tributaries from South Dakota all the way down to Missouri are still above flood stage at various levels. So because of just all that excess runoff, melting snow upstream, there's still going to be problems with flooding. The good news is roads, where areas where the water is receding, the roads are slowly being repaired. BNSF Railroad Company rather, is saying that they're going to get more of their rails back up in service in that region over the next few days. They've already gotten some of them back up. So that's good news. I want to look at road conditions real quick. We'll bring that up, particularly up in Montana, because that's really where going to be the heaviest snow is today and the biggest trouble spots. So right here along I-90 and along I-15, where you see the areas kind of shaded in the pink and the dark red, that's where it could be slushy and snowy during the day. Probably not a lot of road closures, especially on the interstates, but there will be slushy and snowy conditions on some parts of I-90 and 15. So those are the areas you got to watch out for today.
Thank you, Nick Austin. Thanks for the good news, bad news there. And you know, we've been shining a light on what's happening in the Midwest and with rail operations. We're keeping you in tune with our editorial coverage and even on the podcast and the radio show. So we are looking at disruptions, what might be happening in all sectors of the logistics space. And now talking about flatbeds, I think flatbeds, Dean's gonna correct me if I'm wrong, represent about 12% of the trucking over-the-road market. Let's find out if that's true and what else he has to show us. Hi, Dean.
G'day, Chad.
Welcome.
How are you?
Great.
So what I wanted to talk a little bit about today is this challenge that a lot of operators face, and that is how do they measure 2019 performance against 2018? And most industry experts will tell us that 2018 is not the best year to be comparing to because of some extraordinary things that happened. So if we have a look at our chart of the week here, which was published on Saturday night, I've got two indexes for you, Chad. One is the Institute of Supply Management Manufacturing New Orders Index, which is an index of things in the industrial economy. It's freight that truckers haul on flatbeds, steel, machinery, lumber, things like that, all flatbed material. Okay. So it's a measure. Anything above 50 means positive growth. Right. So it's indexed to 50. Anything above 50 is positive growth. And the blue line represents the DAT flatbed barometer. And again, it's an index that measures spot market and contract rate activity and load availability. So again, what you see here, Chad, is that both of these hit record highs in 2018. In fact, they hit a 10-year record high on both of these indices. Both grew about 33% in this 12-month period leading up to here. And early in 2018, what we saw were three things. One was a carryover of construction activity from the hurricanes Michael and Florence. So there was a lot of building activity, a lot of demand for flatbeds. We had the tax code changes, which stimulated spending in the industrial economy. So people were spending more on things that flatbeds hauled. And then we also saw oil prices rally. So we had a lot of drilling activity, especially fracking. So there was a few things driving flatbed demand last year, and that's why these barometers are very important to watch, because they tell you what's coming in the future that won't be there this year. So there's some things that won't be happening this year, because both of them have fallen off. As you can see here, both of them have come right down here, fallen right away.
It was scary here at the beginning of 2019.
Right. And they both recorded drops. The new orders index is down to about 55.4. The flatbed barometer index is down also, but they're still in positive territory, which is important. It's sort of the direction. There is a hint of slowing demand, though, especially in the building industry. Ibrahim talked this week about single-family housing starts, how they were falling off. If we want to have a look at the next chart, which is now the indicator of capacity in the market, and again, I'll put the 12-month time frame here. If we look at where flatbed capacity was this time last year, we can see that in this blue line here, flatbed capacity carriers were rejecting about 25% of all loads that were tendered electronically into the market. So about a quarter of the loads they were rejecting. Today, it's down to about 11%. So as this line comes down, the outbound tender rejections come down for flatbed, capacity increases. Right. Okay? Now, capacity is the weakest in the dry van market, which is at 5.33, so carriers are rejecting only 5% of the loads. That means that they don't have a lot of options, and they're accepting most of the freight that's tendered into the market. Flatbed's got a little bit more demand because of the pent-up building activity from the hurricanes last year. The polar vortex this year slowed down construction activity a little bit. The wildfires in California kind of slowed things down, so there's some demand there for flatbeds. And of course, you saw our deep dive on Saturday. We wrote about the booming construction market in Las Vegas, where those new stadiums going up demanding lots of freight for steel.
Yes, great stuff.
Refrigerated capacity is the tightest. They're rejecting about 21% of their loads, and that's been driven by the no freeze freight requirement, and it's kind of an inverse relationship where refrigerated trailers are needed to keep freight warm in winter so it doesn't freeze. So that's why.
And while it's still high, it's down.
So all of our indices, capacity has increased. As you look at this chart here, capacity has increased across flatbed, dry, and reefer. So the outlook is somewhat suppressed from last year. There's certainly much more capacity. This is against a backdrop of record levels of new truck and trailer orders that happened in October last year, that will be coming out of the factories in the summer. So as capacity increases here, what we're seeing is a double whammy effect where there'll be even more capacity coming into the summer. Yes. What we're hoping for is that volumes increase through the summer, which they will for produce, for refrigerated. Hopefully the consumer economy picks up and we get some more demand for dry vans. And we're looking for some increased activity in the flatbed market as we head into the new year. So the backdrop is a lot of trucks and trailers are going to come out of factories, and we're looking at this roller coaster ride of volumes. So right now we're in the quiet part of the year. Traditionally the spring volumes start to emerge. We haven't seen any signs of that yet, but we're anxiously watching that as each week goes by.
Truck order is looking to stay even through 2019.
So we had a record number last year. There was about 400,000 new trucks ordered last year. There's still 300,000 in the backlog that will come out over the course of this year because the OEMs didn't ramp up their production.
Just doing the best they could to keep up.
Didn't make the same mistake they made years ago. So what we're going to see is that there'll be a trickle effect, and that will drive down used truck prices eventually. But our big concern is that there will be an overcapacity in all sectors if volumes don't pick up. And with the general signs in the economy that things are softening, that's a serious concern that we're watching.
Wow, we will be watching that. It'll be fascinating to see. We're starting to possibly get a little bit of a look into what 2019 might be like. Thank you so much, Dean. Very incisive, very helpful in looking at what is happening right now, but possibly into the futures. And speaking of the futures and what is happening right now, we have our Executive Director of Futures, Addison Armstrong.
Hey,
welcome. Chad. Hi, great to have you here.
Great to be here.
It's an exciting time.
It absolutely is.
Tomorrow is our official, is there an exact time tomorrow that we launch?
Yes, on a regulated futures exchange, there are hours of trading, and tomorrow morning on the Nodal exchange, our product will launch at 9 a.m., and the daily trading hours will be 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday.
Wow.
That's U.S. Eastern Time.
Okay, so coming right up, 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time is typically my favorite time of the day when FreightWaves Now comes up, but boy, that's going to be an exciting time. So tell us, could you tell us a little bit about, just in general, what is the freight futures, going to be, and maybe also, why did we choose the lanes that we've chosen to trade with?
Okay, very good question. So the lanes really come down to what are the most liquid, and by liquid, where are the most transactions occurring on what lanes, and how representative are they of those regions, and then how does that roll up to a national index?
Right.
So, our partners Nodal Exchange and DAT and FreightWaves spent the better part of 2 years analyzing the data that comes from DAT on completed transactions, and we analyze, okay, where's the greatest amount of liquidity, and then how does that relate back to lanes that aren't that specific lane. So, for instance, in this south region here, which comprises Los Angeles to Dallas, many of these lanes, individual lanes that are in this region, will correspond as much as 85% with the lanes that we have as being applicable to the futures market.
Right, okay. So and this lane is Dallas to LA, LA to Dallas.
That's correct.
Right? And here's Seattle to LA, or LA to Seattle.
That's
and this
right.
represents what? This is the west.
This is the south, and then when you come over to the eastern side of the country, you have a triangle that's Philadelphia to Chicago, Chicago to Atlanta, Atlanta back to Philadelphia. Again, these lanes were chosen because they were correlated highly with activity that goes on in some of these smaller lanes in the region. Okay. What you want to do when you're launching a futures contract, of course, is to attract as much liquidity as possible to the individual contracts. If we had gone out with a greater number of lanes, that would have taken away from the ability to garner that kind of liquidity that leads to a successful market.
Okay, well, here is a big question, I think, is with such a gigantic part of the economic pie that freight represents, why has it taken so long to have a futures market?
Well, that's a very good question. So obviously trucking's been around for a long time. Futures contracts have been around for 150 years in the United States for hedging things like grain and soybeans and things like that. So really what's driven those two areas, the trucking area and the futures area together, is the ubiquity of data that we now have in the trucking market. Via things like the ELD mandate, and yes, because truckers have a cell phone with them, and they no longer keep paper logs. There's all kinds of data about capacity and capacity utilization, which can now be used to create better indices. And that data is more readily available and can be translated and actionable through a vehicle like a futures contract.
Is it, last question for you, are there commodities involved? Will there actually be literal trucks that they'll be hedging their bets with? so to speak, not bets, but they're hedging their risk.
Right. So our contracts will be financially settled as opposed to physically settled. A lot of futures contracts that people may be familiar with, such as oil or natural gas, if you don't trade out of that contract and you let it go to delivery, then you have an obligation to make or take delivery. That is not the case with our contracts. They are financially settled, which means that once the contract is over, you no longer have an obligation to either receive or dispatch a truck.
No truck will hit the dock. Thank you so much, Addison. Fantastic stuff. The futures is here. And we are bringing it to you, what is happening right now, each and every day here on FreightWaves Now. Thanks for tuning in. Share the love with us on Instagram, on LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever you share your social media love. We are here coming live to you every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time on FreightWaves.com. So stay tuned. Everything is happening with the Futures Network right now, the exchange such as we understand and can interpret it. In the meantime, don't worry, be happy.